Okay, I'm going to try to do a brief introduction to oscillators. Going to be using a Behringer 2600, which has 3 oscillators, and the oscillators have 4 waveforms: sine, triangle, saw, and pulse wave. We're going to start with the pulse wave, sometimes called the square wave. On my scope, it's a little slanted. I'm not sure if this is the synth or the way I'm monitoring it, but it should be more flat. So a square wave or pulse wave usually has a pulse width parameter, which affects the width of the pulse. It sounds like this. If you move it, you can get some pretty animated sounds. If you send an LFO to the pulse width modulation, which not every synth has, but this one does, you can get these kind of sounds. If you have the pulse width right in the middle, you get more bass. So the next waveform we're going to look at is saw, and it's a buzzier waveform. Good for bass, good for leads. Probably the waveform I use most often. Sometimes you want to use an inverter for your saw wave if you're using it as a modulator, because, well, let's start like this. If you have a filter that self-oscillates, you can use it as an oscillator. This one, it will give you a sine wave. So if we take the saw from oscillator 2 at low frequency and modulate it, it goes up, but sometimes you want it to go down. So if you have a way to invert your saw, you sometimes want to do that. Next waveform we're going to look at is triangle. It is it's like a less loud version of square, or a slightly more harmonic version of sine. If you're using a saw wave as your main wave, and you want to add more bass, you can mix in a triangle. That's without and with. Sine wave works for this as well. So moving on to the sine wave, it's the purest waveform. It's just the fundamental, there's no harmonics. This makes it a really good waveform for frequency modulation, which is using one oscillator or an LFO to modulate another one. So we can do that here with oscillator 1. You can get some pretty interesting sounds that way. If you take two oscillators and send them to a ring modulator, you can get the sum and difference of the two oscillators combined. So here's oscillator 1, and here's 2, and here's them ring modulated. So you can use this to get some kind of plucky bell type sounds. Almost like a digital sound. If you have one oscillator going to the ring mod in low, you get amplitude modulation, which is always what ring mod is doing, but it's more obvious when one of them is low. If your ring mod can go to DC mode, you can use it as a VCA. This is pretty rough. So the speed of the first oscillator lets through the second oscillator. You can use a ring modulator in DC mode as a VCA and use it to just boost your waveforms. So if we have oscillator 2 and we take the sine to another input of the filter, we get the added bass effect. But if we use the ring modulated sine, it's even stronger because it's being boosted. If we take a saw to the ring modulator and use a DC source to increase the VCA level, it chops off the top of the saw. If you invert this, it chops off the bottom of the saw, giving a different sound. You can then combine these waveforms for some interesting shapes. So we're just gonna mess around for a little bit.